There are some Formula One weekends that disappear from memory almost as soon as the checkered flag falls. And then there are weekends that quietly change the direction of an entire season. On the surface, the Austrian Grand Prix doesn't always look like one of those races. The Red Bull Ring is the shortest circuit on the calendar, just 10 corners, barely over a minute for a qualifying lap. It looks simple, almost too simple for modern Formula One, but appearances can be deceiving, because Austria has a habit of exposing things long before the rest of the season catches up. It exposes weaknesses teams thought they had solved. It exposes strengths rivals never saw coming. And every so often, it reveals a breakthrough that changes the championship. This year, Ferrari arrived at the Red Bull Ring carrying something very different from previous seasons. Not enormous expectations, not bold predictions, but quiet confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from optimism. It comes from data. It comes from understanding your car. And perhaps most importantly, it comes from believing you finally solved a problem that's been holding you back for months. That's exactly why so many people around the paddock have started paying attention to Ferrari. Because while everyone has been focused on Red Bull's home race, Mercedes' recent improvements, and McLaren's relentless consistency, Ferrari has been working almost unnoticed. And what they've been learning could prove far more significant than anyone expected. The interesting part is that Ferrari hasn't suddenly become the fastest team overnight. There hasn't been one revolutionary upgrade, no dramatic redesign, no magical component that instantly transformed the SF26 into the class of the field. Instead, their progress has been much quieter, much more methodical. And in Formula One, that's often how the biggest breakthroughs happen. One improvement, then another, until suddenly the entire package feels completely different. That appears to be exactly what's happening inside Ferrari. If you compare the team now to where it was just a few races ago, the difference isn't only visible on the timing screens, it's visible everywhere. The radio conversations sound calmer, engineers seem more confident, strategy decisions arrive quicker, pit stops look sharper. Even Lewis Hamilton appears noticeably more relaxed behind the wheel. Those aren't random observations. They're usually the first signs that a Formula One team is beginning to trust its own car. And trust changes everything. For much of the early season, Ferrari looked like a team still searching for answers. There were weekends where the car showed incredible pace during practice. Then qualifying arrived, and that pace disappeared. Other weekends, race strategy became the biggest obstacle. Sometimes tire degradation prevented Hamilton and his teammate from fully attacking. Other times, the balance of the car changed dramatically as fuel loads came down. No single issue was catastrophic, but together, they stopped Ferrari from consistently fighting at the very front. The frustrating part was that the potential was always there. Engineers could see it. Drivers could feel it. The lap times occasionally proved it. But putting everything together across an entire race weekend remained incredibly difficult. That seems to have changed. And Austria may be the circuit where everyone finally notices. Because the Red Bull Ring asks questions very few circuits can. The first sector is all about breaking confidence and traction. Drivers climb steep hills while trying to put every bit of power onto the asphalt. A tiny loss of rear grip costs valuable time all the way down the next straight. The middle sector rewards aerodynamic stability. The final sector demands mechanical balance through a sequence of fast, flowing corners. It's almost like three completely different circuits combined into one lap. If your car has even one major weakness, Austria finds it. That's why engineers love this circuit. It tells them the truth. And according to Ferrari's recent comments, the truth is becoming much more encouraging. Hamilton has repeatedly spoken about feeling increasingly connected with the car. Not necessarily because it's dramatically faster, but because it's becoming more predictable. That single word carries enormous importance inside Formula One. Predictability allows drivers to brake later, attack harder, manage tires more effectively, take calculated risks during wheel-to-wheel battles. When a driver knows exactly how the rear of the car will react, confidence grows almost automatically. Confidence then becomes lap time, and lap time becomes results. Hamilton has built his entire career around extracting maximum performance from cars he trusts. During his championship years with Mercedes, one of his greatest strengths wasn't simply outright speed. It was consistency. He knew exactly what the car would do entering every corner. That allowed him to push right at the limit without constantly correcting mistakes. Ferrari appears to be moving toward that same feeling. Not perfectly, not completely, but closer than it has been all season. Interestingly, this improvement hasn't been driven by one massive technical innovation. Instead, reports from inside the paddock suggest Ferrari has spent weeks refining the car's operating window. To casual fans, that might sound insignificant. To Formula One engineers, it's everything. Every Formula One car performs best within a very specific setup range. Ride height, suspension stiffness, brake temperatures, tire pressures, aerodynamic balance. When those elements work together, the car becomes predictable. When they don't, drivers spend entire weekends chasing balance instead of finding speed. Earlier this season, Ferrari often looked trapped in exactly that cycle. One session would look promising. The next would raise completely new questions. Engineers kept searching, drivers kept adapting. Solutions rarely lasted long. Now, however, something appears different. Instead of constantly reacting to problems, Ferrari seems to be anticipating them. That's a huge change. It suggests the team understands its package far better than it did just a few races ago. And if that's true, Austria becomes the perfect place to prove it, because this circuit punishes uncertainty more than almost any other on the calendar. There's another reason this weekend feels so important: momentum. Formula One seasons are often defined by moments when teams suddenly realize they're moving in the right direction. Not because they win one race, because everything starts making sense. The data matches the simulations. The drivers stop asking questions. The engineers stop making desperate changes. Instead of searching for speed, they're refining it. Ferrari may have reached exactly that point, which raises an even bigger question. If the team has finally unlocked the true potential of the SF26, how much performance has been hidden all along? Because if Austria confirms Ferrari's latest progress, the rest of the grid won't simply be facing a faster Ferrari. They could be facing a Ferrari that finally understands exactly how to unlock its speed every single weekend. And that possibility is beginning to make rival teams extremely uncomfortable. Because behind the scenes, Ferrari's latest technical direction may be revealing something much bigger than anyone expected. If Ferrari has truly found something special, the first place it will become obvious isn't on the podium. It's inside the data. Long before fans notice a championship challenge taking shape, engineers can already see it hidden inside thousands of lines of telemetry. Tiny gains under braking, better traction coming out of slow-speed corners, more consistent tire temperatures over a race stint, margins so small that television cameras never capture them, but large enough to decide victories. That's why Austria has become such an important test, because this circuit doesn't allow teams to hide behind clever strategy or unusual track characteristics. The Red Bull Ring asks one simple question: how complete is your car? For Ferrari, that question has been difficult to answer throughout the season. There have been races where the SF26 looked capable of matching the front runners over a single lap. Then, as the race unfolded, something changed. The balance shifted. The tires overheated. Confidence disappeared. Hamilton often found himself managing problems instead of attacking rivals. That pattern frustrated everyone inside Maranello. The speed was there, the execution wasn't. But over the last few race weekends, something remarkable has started happening. Instead of fading during long runs, Ferrari has actually looked stronger. That isn't an accident. In Formula One, long-run pace usually tells the real story. Anyone can produce one spectacular qualifying lap with fresh tires and low fuel. Winning races is completely different. Drivers must protect the tires while still pushing. Engineers must predict degradation before it happens. Strategists have to decide whether to attack early or extend the stint. Every lap becomes a balancing act. Recently, Ferrari has looked much more comfortable in that situation. Hamilton himself has hinted that the car is allowing him to drive more naturally. That may sound like a small detail. In reality, it changes almost everything. Throughout his career, Hamilton has always been at his best when he doesn't need to think about the car. When every braking zone feels familiar, when every corner exit behaves exactly as expected. That allows him to focus entirely on racing. Instead of fighting the car, he's fighting the competition. Austria rewards that kind of confidence more than almost any other circuit. The uphill approach into Turn 3 is one of the heaviest braking zones on the calendar. Drivers arrive at incredible speed before slowing dramatically while the car is still climbing. Any instability at the rear immediately costs time. Any hesitation means missing the apex. And missing one apex here doesn't just ruin one corner. It compromises the next straight, the next overtaking opportunity. Sometimes even the entire lap. That's why Hamilton's recent confidence has caught the attention of rival teams. His steering inputs have become smoother. The corrections that were common earlier in the season have almost disappeared. He's committing earlier into corners, getting on the throttle sooner. Those are usually the signs of a driver who finally trusts the platform underneath him. And once Hamilton reaches that point, history suggests he's incredibly difficult to beat. But perhaps the biggest change hasn't happened inside the cockpit. It's happened inside Ferrari's engineering room. Earlier this season, Ferrari often looked like a team chasing answers. Every practice session brought another setup experiment. Every qualifying session seemed to reveal another weakness. One adjustment solved the front-end grip, another created instability at the rear. The engineers appeared to be solving one problem while creating another. That cycle seems to have ended. Instead of searching desperately for balance, Ferrari now appears to be refining it. That difference might sound subtle. Inside Formula One, it's enormous, because development changes completely once engineers understand their car. Instead of making broad changes, they begin making incredibly precise ones. A few millimeters of ride height, tiny suspension adjustments, minor aerodynamic tweaks. Each improvement builds on the previous one. Performance becomes predictable, progress becomes repeatable, and suddenly, the car starts improving much faster. That may be exactly what's happening in Maranello. Several Paddock observers have noted that Ferrari's updates no longer look like emergency fixes. Instead, they appear to follow one clear development direction. Every new component seems connected to the last. Every setup change supports the same philosophy. That's a sign of confidence. It's also a sign that Ferrari believes it understands where the remaining performance is hidden. Austria could be the first circuit where all those improvements come together. The Red Bull Ring rewards efficiency, not just aerodynamic efficiency, operational efficiency, the fastest pit stops, the quickest strategy calls, the ability to react instantly when race conditions change. Those areas have quietly become Ferrari strengths. Communication over the team radio sounds calmer, pit wall decisions arrive sooner, mechanics execute stops with remarkable consistency. These aren't the moments that dominate headlines, but they're often the difference between finishing second or standing on the top step of the podium. Hamilton knows that better than anyone. Many of his greatest victories with Mercedes weren't won through outright speed alone. They came because the entire team operated as one. The driver, the engineers, the strategists, everyone trusted each other. That same feeling appears to be growing inside Ferrari, and confidence spreads quickly. When drivers trust engineers, engineers become more willing to take calculated risks. When strategies succeed, drivers push even harder. Success creates belief. Belief creates momentum. Momentum creates championships. That may sound dramatic, but Formula One history is filled with examples of teams transforming almost overnight once everything finally clicks into place. The question now is whether Ferrari has reached that point. If the answer is yes, Austria won't simply be another race weekend. It will become proof that Ferrari's resurgence is real. And that's exactly what concerns the rest of the paddock. Because if Ferrari has truly solved its biggest weakness, the conversation changes immediately. Mercedes can no longer rely on Ferrari making operational mistakes. McLaren must prepare for another consistent challenger. Red Bull may suddenly find itself fighting on multiple fronts instead of controlling the pace. One competitive weekend can change expectations. Several competitive weekends can change a championship. Ferrari knows that. Hamilton certainly knows that. Which is why his recent confidence feels different from anything we've heard earlier this season. He's no longer talking about finding speed. He's talking about building consistency. And consistency has always been the foundation of championship-winning teams. But there is one final piece of this puzzle that could determine whether Ferrari's Austrian breakthrough becomes a one-weekend success or the beginning of something much bigger. Because what the team has discovered may not only transform Austria, it could completely reshape the rest of the Formula One season. If Ferrari's performance in Austria proves to be more than just another strong weekend, historians may eventually look back at this race as the moment everything started to change. Not because Ferrari suddenly became unbeatable, not because every problem disappeared overnight, but because Formula One championships are rarely won by dramatic breakthroughs. They're won when a team quietly reaches the point where everything begins working together. The driver, the engineers, the strategy department, the mechanics, the factory back in Maranello. Every department moving in exactly the same direction. For much of the last few seasons, Ferrari has often looked like a team capable of producing moments of brilliance without maintaining them. One weekend they looked unstoppable. The next, they were struggling to understand why the pace had vanished. That inconsistency has been their biggest enemy. Not a lack of talent, not a lack of resources, simply the inability to reproduce their best performance every single weekend. Austria may be suggesting that's finally changing, because the signs go far beyond lap times. Lewis Hamilton's confidence has grown with every race. His radio messages sound calmer. He's spending less time discussing balance problems and more time talking about maximizing performance. That may sound like a subtle difference. Inside Formula One, it's enormous. When a driver stops worrying about the car, he starts thinking about beating everyone else. That's where Hamilton has always been at his most dangerous. Throughout his career, one quality has separated him from almost every rival he's faced. He doesn't simply drive quickly, he understands how championships evolve. Hamilton knows there is no prize for leading after one spectacular weekend. The goal is to build momentum that lasts for months, and momentum appears to be exactly what Ferrari is creating. That should concern every rival team, because momentum doesn't just improve performance, it changes psychology. Drivers begin taking more risks because they trust the car. Engineers become more aggressive because they trust the data. Strategists make faster decisions because previous calls have worked. Success creates belief. Belief creates even more success. It's a cycle every championship-winning team has experienced. Mercedes lived through it during Hamilton's dominant years. Red Bull experienced it during Max Verstappen's rise. Now Ferrari may finally be entering that same phase. The Austrian Grand Prix could become the first clear sign. And perhaps that's why so many teams are paying close attention. The Red Bull Ring isn't just another stop on the calendar. It's one of the best circuits for exposing the complete performance of a Formula One car. You need efficient aerodynamics, excellent traction, strong braking stability, reliable tire management, quick acceleration, and flawless execution. Weaknesses become impossible to hide. If Ferrari performs well here, it sends a message to the rest of the grid. A message that says their recent improvements weren't track-specific. They weren't lucky. They weren't temporary. They were real. That changes how every rival prepares for the races ahead. Development priorities shift. Upgrade schedules change. Simulation programs are rewritten. Because Formula One isn't only fought on race weekends. It's fought inside factories every single day. If Ferrari has genuinely unlocked another level of performance, every other team immediately starts asking the same question. How did they do it? That's when the pressure begins spreading across the paddock. Mercedes may accelerate development. McLaren could introduce upgrades earlier than planned. Red Bull might rethink parts of its setup philosophy. One team's progress often forces everyone else to respond. Hamilton understands that better than almost anyone. He's been on both sides of that battle. He's watched rivals chase Mercedes for years. Now, for the first time in a long while, he may be part of the team setting the direction instead of following it. And that's exactly what Ferrari has been working toward. Not simply becoming competitive, becoming the team everyone else has to react to. There is another reason Austria matters so much. The Formula One season is entering the stage where small gains become increasingly valuable. Early in the year, teams introduce major upgrade packages. Later in the season, those opportunities become smaller. Development slows, budgets tighten, attention slowly begins shifting toward next year's car. That means the teams that understand their current package best often gain the biggest advantage. Ferrari appears to be reaching that point. Instead of searching for answers, they're refining details. And in Formula One, details decide championships. A tenth of a second in qualifying. A perfectly timed pit stop. One extra lap before making a tire change. A slightly better exit from turn 3. Tiny margins. Massive consequences. Those are the areas where Ferrari has quietly improved. Perhaps that's what Austria is really revealing. Not that Ferrari suddenly found one magical upgrade, but that months of careful work, are finally producing visible results. Hamilton's experience has played a major role in that process. Since arriving at Ferrari, he's pushed for consistency, for communication, for understanding, not dramatic changes every weekend. Steady progress. The kind of progress championship teams rely on, and judging by Ferrari's recent performances, that philosophy is beginning to pay off. Of course, Formula One never stands still. Even if Ferrari has found something special this weekend, rivals will respond, new upgrades will arrive, weather conditions will change, different circuits will ask different questions. Nothing is guaranteed. That's exactly why Austria feels so important. It's not the final answer. It's the strongest piece of evidence so far. If Ferrari continues performing at this level over the next several races, the conversation around this season could change completely. Instead of asking whether Ferrari belongs in the championship fight, people may start asking whether they're becoming the favorites. That would have sounded impossible only a few months ago. Now, it feels increasingly realistic, because the biggest transformations in Formula One rarely happen with one spectacular announcement. They happen quietly. One improved setup, one successful upgrade, one confident driver, one race where everything finally comes together. Then suddenly, everyone realizes the team they've been underestimating has become the benchmark. Perhaps that's exactly what's happening at Ferrari. Austria may not simply be another Grand Prix, it may be remembered as the weekend Ferrari stopped searching for speed and started believing it could beat anyone. If that belief continues growing over the coming races, the battle for the championship could look very different by the time the season reaches its final rounds. And that might be the most important discovery Ferrari has made all year. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Formula One news, technical analysis, and championship updates. Do you think Ferrari has genuinely found something that changes everything, or is Austria simply a circuit that suits the SF26? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.